appreciate it. So we're super happy to welcome David Lightbown here. David actually did this talk, a similar talk recently at GDC Europe. So we're getting a taste of GDC tonight, which is amazing. And we really appreciate you here. We're going to do just a couple quick announcements. So first off, a lot of you are asking about MIGs. So I've been talking with the organizer. We have a new organizer at MIGs this year. So I've been working on the Ottawa discount code. For those of you who took advantage last year, we actually got a 50% off code last year. That is not happening this year. It's going to be a 10 or 15% code, which still makes a pretty big difference on a $700 ticket. I'm going to have that in the next couple of days. So if you guys want to email me or reach out to me, Jillian Mood, on Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever, I'll get you that code. I'm not going to be promoting it outward just because they don't want that, so I can give it to friends and family and you guys here in Ottawa. So the organizers gave us a free ticket tonight to thank us for our patience for waiting for the code. So hopefully everyone put their name into the raffle. I think we got everyone's name. If you didn't, you can see Jerry. This is a $700 MIGS ticket, so you get a full conference pass, which is excellent. MIGS will be great this year, so it's kicking off Sunday, November 13th. Evan, is Evan here? Where's Evan? Evan's going to be speaking. I'm going to be doing an HR panel, which will be fun. I think we're the only two speakers. Yeah, so come support us for sure. Also, I'm going to be doing a mentor cafe on the Sunday to kick off MIGS. And essentially what it is we get industry leaders it's like a speed dating thing to mentor newcomers and indies in the industry. If anyone is interested in mentoring or being mentored, definitely reach out to me and we can set that up. So stay tuned for that. There's also a conference in Toronto, Game on Ventures. This conference is like the business of making games, and it's actually going to be much more national and international conference this year. We have a 20% off code, which I can give you as well. So stay tuned for that. Very quickly, Pens and Pixels and I are doing a sexy art night. So there's going to be an art gala suiting up at Macmillan, which is a design company in the market. And we wanted to have like a fancy art meets video games night. We're still calling out for artists. So if there's an artist here that wants to be part of the event, there's going to be a silent auction. There's going to be some press there, caviar, champagne, the whole works. So if you want more information, you can go to Jillian Mood and Partners website or Pens and Pixels website and get that information. Tickets will be $10 because we're going above and beyond to provide you with a lot of stuff. And tickets will be going on sale next week, so watch for that. And lastly, for me, is Girl Force. So a group of us in Ottawa got together to start mentoring girls in high school and above that have no technical experience in how to make a game from A to Z. And our first semester was a huge success. We actually had a game jam where the girls made their own game. We're starting semester 2 in Ottawa, or in October in Ottawa. So if you know of any girls or women that might be interested in learning how to make video games, no technical experience is needed. You can go to Girl Force website and applications are open till October 7th. That? Sorry? No, there's no age limit. 15 and over just because of sort of legislation. And also we have a policy of no one gets turned away. So if you want to help, anyone can help. So if you want to volunteer your time or help mentor or help us get equipment for the girls, no one gets turned away, so you can help in some shape or form.
Awesome. Thank you all guys for coming up. Thanks Jillian for all the announcements, and thank you to you guys for your patience and for David as well.
Thank you.
We usually don't run into issues like this. Most of our our attendees, our usual attendees know. We've had a couple of hiccups in the past, but this has been one of the worst experiences. But thankfully to some of the
that's from here on out, though.
It's only up from here, right? Thanks to the people from the audience that helped us troubleshoot this, and also to Fatima that lended her laptop and all her gear. Look at, she just emptied her entire screen bag. We're just literally using all our tools right now. Thank you so much. One quick announcement before David takes the stage is we're looking for more volunteers to join our team, to help us run IGDA. Specifically, we're looking for someone that has experience with social media and PR. For more information, please write to ottawa@igda.org. Now, without further ado, thank you again for your patience, and David, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Oh, that would be great. So thank you very much for being here. So the title of the presentation obviously is Designing the User Experience of Game Development Tools. I just want to get a sense a little bit about who's here. So how many of you are working as game developers right now? And how many of you are students? And how many of you have ever used some sort of piece of software or tool to make a game? Pretty much everybody, right? So this talk will give you, so you'll have a takeaway from the presentation that I'm going to give, because not only, even if you're not developing your own tools, you're still using tools and you might want to find ways to make them better. I'm also going to require 2 participants from the audience. So 1 and 2. Okay, thank you, perfect. You guys back there. If you could come and sit towards the front here, because I'm going to call on you guys in a couple of minutes. So what's your name? Alex. Alex, nice to meet you. Thank you.
Hello.
And Fatima?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So it's September, end of September, it's almost October, which means it's going to be Halloween time pretty soon. These are my kids on the left side. It's pretty easy to tell what my daughter is dressed up as. Wow, that gift is playing really quickly. So no question about who that is, right? That's pretty easy. Now my son, on the other hand, you guys also, if you're game developers, you probably also know as well who that is. So if I were to ask you who that is, you might say, well, it's obviously Ryu from Street Fighter. So my son said that he wanted to dress up this way, and he said he wanted to dress up like this and with the gi and everything. And I said, that's great. You want to be Ryu from Street Fighter 2, right? And he said, Street Fighter 2? No. You got it all wrong. I don't want to be Ryu. And I said, what are you talking about? Clearly you're dressed up as that. He said, didn't you look at my headband? Can't you see my headband is white? I'm obviously Ryu from Street Fighter Alpha. He's already an expert, which is great. So those are my crazy kids, and this is me. So I'm David Lightbown, UX Director for the Technology Group at Ubisoft Montreal. And so I've been working in the games industry for about 15 years. I started in about 2001 approximately, and I'd worked in web design and in CG and stuff like that before. And I've used all sorts of different tools on many different consoles, using lots of different types of engines and working with lots of different companies over the years. And I've had a lot of interesting experiences, and a lot of my work focuses on tools and productivity and pipelines. And that's me, and I also want to talk to you about this person. Her name is Lucy Sookman, and she worked for this company you guys might recognize. Their logo looks a bit different now, but the name of the company is Xerox. And in the 1970s, Xerox had this amazing photocopier. So I think it was called the Xerox 9500. And it was the most revolutionary photocopier at the time. Now, it did things that might not be impressive to us, but things like double-sided copying or automatically stapling pages or collating, putting pages together, flipping them, all that stuff. This machine did it, and it was really impressive. And they tried to sell this machine as being really simple. It's a one-button photocopier. You press this one button, it's super easy to use. The problem is that they were getting feedback from their customers that it was not easy to use, and it was in fact really frustrating. They'd spent a lot of money. You can imagine how much something this big in the 1970s might cost. So Lucy Sookman, who is a sort of worked in psychology and productivity, was hired by Xerox to look at ways to try to make things better. And one of the first things she did was she asked to have a photocopier installed in a room so that she could do some user testing, some observation. So she set up a camera, and she wrote up a little series of tasks for people to do. And they would come in, and they would test out the machine and try to figure out how to use it. So she went and brought in these 2 particular people, 2 individuals, to come and test the machine. And they were given a simple task, try to photocopy page double-sided. So they tried to do that. 1 hour passes. They can't figure it out. 2 hours pass. They still can't figure it out. Finally, 3 hours, they break out the manual. It's supposed to be easy. You're not supposed to be able to use a manual, right? You don't need a manual. They break out the manual. They still can't figure it out. So they give up. And so Lucy Sookman takes these results to the board of directors at Xerox, and she says, you see, that this is a problem. We need to do something about this. We need to improve the situation. And so the board of directors, the executive said, there's nothing wrong with our machine. It's great. We put all of this research into it. It's fine. You must have gotten something. You must have gotten 2 idiots off the loading dock to do this, right? And that's when she revealed that the two people she brought in were two of the most brilliant scientists working at Xerox. Some of the most gifted people in the company. The guy on the left invented artificial intelligence. These guys aren't dumb. And this led Xerox onto a path of hiring more people like Lucy Sookman to try to improve their products. Now, some of you as game developers, you may have had an experience where you're using a tool and you feel frustrated, like it's very hard for you to be productive. Some tools are not quite as efficient as others, or you have to use something and you don't have a choice. Now, how much time have you wasted on that, and how much additional polish could you have put onto your product if the tools were more efficient? And people who get themselves into this situation, and this is very typical with computers, they feel stupid. That they feel like they should be smart enough to know how to use the tools better. But it's not really how it should be. And the people who develop the tools often are under time pressure to try to produce this stuff and put it into the hands of content creators so that they can work. And they're often rushed out the door without a lot of thought being put into the people that are going to use them. So here's what's typically happening in a tools development pipeline. We take the time to develop the tools so that we can put them in the hands of people so that they can create content in production. But then at the end of the project, we look back at the tools and say, how did we ever ship a game with these things? This is crazy. This is a disaster. We have to go back and rework the tools. And we end up spending this additional time fixing the tools, if we're even given the time and the money to do that. What if we spent a little bit more time trying to understand how to make those tools, how to make them better for people? If they're more efficient, could we then spend less time? Could we be more efficient in producing content for the game? And then not have as much time reworking the tools at the end, let's say. Now, how much time could we save doing that? And it's kind of hard to see from back there. If you suggest to somebody, let's spend more time on the tools, it's hard to convince somebody of that. But in the long term, it could look something like this. Now, I spent most of my career working as a graphics TD. And some of my best days working as a graphics TD were days when people would come to my desk, or I'd see them in the elevator, and they would say, you know, that tool, that script that you made, it really helped me a lot. I was really able to be more productive. That really makes my day. Like, it really makes me feel happy. And some of my worst days are the days where I see somebody, I walk by their desk, and I see them frustrated trying to just do this little small thing in the game. Just do one small thing just so they can build and see something change, or just fix something. And as a TD, I have a limited set of tools available to me. Right? I can write some scripts, I can try to do some improvements to the pipeline, but I was trying to find ways to make things more productive. I was trying to think there must be some other way to help people be more efficient. And I was handed this book by a colleague of mine, and that book led to another, and that book led to another, and to another, and I discovered that there is this field that is really expressly for this, called user experience design, usability. All of those things fall into the same category. Some of you guys might be familiar with some of these books. And reading those books and looking at the situation that I was in led me to a conclusion, and that's what I'd like to share with you today. And that is that the games industry needs to make the user experience of tools a priority. Now, there are other companies in other industries outside of the games industry that have started doing this or have thought about these things. You guys certainly are familiar with the company Apple, and they're known for the ease of use of some of their products. But when they entered the MP3 player market, this is what they were going up against, right? The Creative Nomad. I don't know if you guys remember this. It was heavy, it was clunky, it didn't quite work very well, it didn't have a big battery life, it didn't have a very large hard drive, and they responded with something that has pretty much at the time swept the market. And now if you think MP3 players, it's inevitable you're going to think about Apple. Or Google as well. When they entered the search space, this was one of their main competitors, right? Remember that? Right, where do you click? There's like a Visa card button at the bottom. Am I supposed to pay for this? I'm really not sure how this works. There's just too much stuff. I just want to search for something. And Google responded with this. Something that's very simple. You just type in what you want to look for and it finds it. So why do we need to do this? Why is it important for us to do this in the games industry? Well, one good reason, because we're interested in most of these productivity. This is Jim Brown, who works for Epic. It's funny story is I gave this talk once a couple of years ago, and then I gave the talk again, and he happened to be in the audience. I remember, and I asked, "Is Jim Brown in the audience?" There was a guy in the back. He said, "Yeah, I'm back here." It's pretty awesome. It's kind of weird though to have your head up there, like super big. What's that like? It's got to be really weird. Anyway, Jim Brown gave this talk at GDC called Level Design in a Day. And in this talk, he talks about what we can gain by just making little improvements to our productivity. For example, if we have 200 developers, and they're each spending 20 minutes a day doing something, that's about 66 hours every day, and 320 hours a week, or 100 hours, 18,000 hours every year rather. And if you calculate that, it's more like 100 months every year across all of those people. This could be building, waiting for a build to finish. It could be waiting for a network transfer. It could be all sorts of things. 20 minutes a day is actually not that much if you consider the scale. Even 20 people, we're talking about 10 months a year in that case. But that basically means, essentially, that when 200 game developers save 20 minutes a day, they can save over 100 man-months per year. And where do you want to spend that? Right? Do you want to put that into meeting your deadlines? Or do you want to spend that in trying to get the polish that you've been after for a while? So, okay, fine. It's probably maybe a situation that you might be familiar with. You may have something in particular that takes time and that you have to waste time working through every single day, and it adds up over time. Well, why is this happening in the first place? What is it that's causing us to slow down like this? Well, to understand that, we have to understand something called the human action cycle. Whenever we perform an action, we do essentially three things. First, we sense, so we take in information from the outside world. Then we think about it. We process that information, we evaluate it, and then we execute. We do something, we manipulate the computer, the keyboard, the mouse to do something. And then we see the results, right? And we start back over again. And this cycle goes on millions of times per second, let's say, as you're processing the information. So let's imagine that you have picked up a Wii controller for the first time, right? So you can look at it, you can kind of feel it, kind of get a sense of it, and you see the form with your eyes, you feel it with your hands, and then you start to think about what that means. And where have I seen this before? How can I use this? How can I manipulate this to be able to do something with it, to be able to play a game? And then finally, you act. So you pick it up and you use it. And we go through this process over and over again. We sense, and then we think, and then we act. Sense, think, act. Sense, think, act. Now, the more that we use this Wii controller, as we get more experienced with it, we spend less and less time sensing and less time thinking and more time acting. Right? We've mastered it, and now we know exactly what to do. And we can spend more time using it. We can spend more time doing things with it, producing things. Now, Susan Weinschenk also talks about another concept that's important to understand. Not only do we have these concepts of sense, think, and act, but each of those things have a different weight in how much time it takes our brain to process them. Acting takes very, very little brain power. Once we know what we're going to do, the execution of that takes very little brain power. After that is sensing, processing things, seeing things, hearing things, and understanding what they mean. And the heaviest weight that we can process is thinking, trying to understand something, looking at a complex situation and trying to process what it means and what we're supposed to do as a result. So that basically means that, in the time that you could be thinking about one complicated thing, you could be doing a bunch of sensing, or you could be doing a whole bunch of acting. Right? So the more time we spend trying to figure out what the tool is trying to tell us and what we're supposed to do in the pipeline is time that we could be spending being productive. So when you see a controller that you don't really understand how to use, you have to think about how to use it. Or if you have something that doesn't quite look like a controller, right? And you're not quite sure what to do with it. You spend a lot more time in the think or in the sense, and that's less time you're spending in the act.
Those look pretty cool though.
Yeah.
I have an image of an N64 controller.
Trying to make a game with those though.
Yeah. Cool.
Because you hold it like in the middle.
Which one do I hold?
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Hold the dragon.
So the less time we spend sensing and the less time we spend thinking is more time that we can spend acting. So how can we do this? So we know what's going on, we know why it's happening, because we're spending all this time in the think and in the sense and not in the act when we're using these tools. How can we try to make these tools better? And that's by applying techniques of user experience design. And that's essentially what I've been doing at Ubisoft for the last couple of years. And learning from those books and applying them to the games industry, certainly the way we do it is a bit different. The way we do it is a bit different compared to, let's say, consumer electronics. The way that Apple does it, the way that Google does it, is not quite the same way. We are focused more on productivity and not so much on enjoyment or having what would be called a delightful experience. This is more about productivity. And there are lots of techniques that we can use to try to make things more efficient. So there's 6 techniques here on the left that I'm going to walk through, and I'm going to explain to you what each of those different things mean. Icons and color, natural mapping, feedback, excise, representation, and progressive disclosure. Let's start with icons and color. So I don't know if you guys know this, but 10% of men in North America have some form of color blindness. There's a good chance that in this room there are a couple people who have color blindness, even a minor form of color blindness that you're not even aware of, potentially. Or some of you are aware of your color blindness. But that means that in North America, just North America, that means there are over 25 million men who suffer from some form of color blindness. That might seem like a minor thing, but it's not if you think about this. For example, these lights, these traffic lights, obviously red, yellow, and green, you know what they mean, you know what they represent. It's important for you to know to stop. But people who suffer from some of the worst forms of color blindness see them like this. One of the ways that they've learned to adapt to it is, of course, the position of the lights is always consistent. But you've probably seen maybe something like this before, where they have square, diamond, and circular shaped lights. I've seen them in Montreal, and I've heard that in New Brunswick as well, parts of it they have them as well. So the shape of the lights, even if you don't see the colors perfectly, you can still know which one is active and what they represent. So just relying on color. In fact, there was an article in Campus Research recently about a game that came out that was had just color information, and they had to also add additional information to make it easier for people. This is the same sort of problem. If you don't also have form and all of your shapes are the same, you're not able to distinguish one from the other quite as easily. And people spend more time in the sense, and maybe potentially in the think phase and not in the act phase. So you can imagine if you're working with an animation timeline, and here are your keyframes on the animation timeline, and if each of these keyframes represent different things with different colors, that's fine. But if you have certain form of color blindness, then you're going to see them like this. So maybe you can work, but not quite as comfortably as you'd like to. And it would take you a lot more time to distinguish what each of these different keyframes are and represent. Now, by using form in addition to color, not only do we allow people to imply what each of these keyframes might represent, but also it's easier, even if you have color blindness or some form of color blindness, to be able to distinguish between each one and what they represent. So that's icons and color. Now, what about natural mapping? Now, you guys might be familiar with this game. What is it? Thank you. So in Punch-Out, you use the NES controller to do left and right punches with the B and A buttons. Now, the B button on the left does a left punch, and the A button on the right does a right punch. Right? And that seems reasonable. Now, let's imagine that those two were reversed, right? And the button on the right punches left, and the button on the left punches right. And that would be really frustrating, right? You know, Mike Tyson, he does that wink, and you're supposed to go in for the uppercut, and you press the wrong button, and you lose. Some people would throw their controllers out the window, right? And that's not the case, because they're mapped correctly. But we see this often, and we have buttons that manipulate data to move them up and down. You might look at this and think it's ridiculous. But you actually see this in a lot of places, where the positioning of the buttons does not necessarily represent what they're supposed to manipulate. Right? So every time you look at them, there is no standard is up on the left or on the right by default. And I've seen buttons where it's like this, buttons where it's like that, like this, like that. It's just something that people do when they don't have enough space. Ideally, we want to try to orient buttons, or we want to have tools or use tools that have the button orientation in the correct way. Because again, that's more time we're spending in the think phase. Other examples like this, for example, the Unity tree tool. Some of you guys may have worked with this before, where the positioning of the nodes is a representation of the tree itself. So if you have to go ahead and grab the trunk, you know to click on the bottom. You have to select the leaves, you know to look at the top. And there's no question about which part of the control is going to naturally map to the part of the content that you're going to manipulate. So that's natural mapping. Now, feedback. What is feedback? Well, again, what's this game?
Sonic.
Thank God. Nice. Sonic. There we go. Well done. So, in Sonic, when you pick up a fire ring, when you pick up a fire flower in Mario Brothers, you change color, and this signifies to the player that something has happened, right? And they know now that something is different, and they can try to experiment pressing with the B button. They realize they can fire fireballs, which is cool. And then eventually, that goes away, and you lose your ability to fire fireballs. And it makes sense, right? There is some feedback to the player. They're told that something has changed, and now it's back the way it was before. Now imagine if you were playing Mario and you walk over a fire flower and nothing happened. Right? No sound, no color. Right? How would you know that something had happened and you were supposed to do something? And one day you might realize that you pressed the B button and you were able to fire fireballs. You would have really liked to have known that like 6 hours ago after you died 100 times, right? So there's no feedback, right? And if you played a game like this, you would think, this is ridiculous. How can I play a game that doesn't tell me what's going on? But again, we work with all sorts of tools that just freeze up and have no progress bars, or no cursors. They don't tell us to wait, or don't tell us what we're supposed to do next.
Can I like make a comment about that? How many people dealt with Unity and forgot that like you were in play mode and then edited a bunch of stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a way to change play mode tint so that when you press play, the rest of the screen turns like a different color. That helps you like not screw that up a billion times. Because I went through that too.
Or even a fun to do all the changes that you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, there you go. You learned something new. So that's feedback. Now, what's excise? I talked about how we have these loads, the sense load and the think load, and those are definitely issues. But too much of what's called the act load, the motor load, is still a problem. So what is excise? So let's imagine going back to our NES example that you're playing, playing a game and there's an enemy firing bullets at you and you have to dodge out of the way. This controller, the way that it's oriented, makes it really easy to be able to do that. But what if it looked like this? It wouldn't be quite as pleasant an experience, but especially if the enemy attacked you, you have to move your thumb all the way over to the other side of the controller and you die. Another reason to throw your controller out the window, right? But that's not how the controller looks. It's not how it's designed. But we have a lot of tools that require us to dance all over the screen with all these unnecessary button clicks. All of that is what's called excise. All of this travel that you're doing with the mouse to be able to manipulate stuff on the screen to get to where you're going to. A lot of it unnecessary. What we want to try to do is try to put our controls to the things that we're manipulating nearby the content that we're going to be working with, right? And I've seen this before. We have a lot of dual screen setups, like a lot of you do, but at Ubisoft as well, where people are working on one screen, clicking a button over here, moving the mouse all the way over to the other side and working on something over there and going back and forth. The amount of excise that they spend going back and forth, again, talking about 200 developers times 20 minutes a day, it really adds up. Okay, so that's excise. What about representation? And this is when I'm going to soon call on my participants who are sitting in the front row today. So here's what we'll do. I would like to get you to stand up, please, if you can. And oh, thank you, that's so nice. Stand. Actually, no. Actually, I need you to dim the lights because I need to be able to see the screen. Fantastic. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you a series of letters and numbers on the screen. Okay. I'm going to show them to you for about 2 or 3 seconds. I want you to try to remember as many of them as you can. You ready to do that?
I guess.
Okay. And go. Okay. How many letters would you say that there were approximately?
I'd say about like 8.
8 letters, okay. And can you recall any of them? Just kind of throw them out at me.
M, N, N, I, S, E. Stop there.
Okay. Now can you tell me what they are from the left-hand side of the screen all the way to the right-hand side of the screen? Start on the left.
I, M, E, S, N, N.
Yeah, okay, missed a few, but so that's I-N-E-S-I-N. So you think there are about 8?
Yeah.
And those are the ones that you remember?
About like 4 numbers.
Okay. I'm going to show you the same letters and numbers again for 3 seconds. And I want you to memorize them. I want you to try to read them back to me afterwards, okay? Are you ready? Yeah. And go. could probably tell them to me from left to right as well, couldn't you?
Yeah.
All right, great. I'd like both of you guys to stand up, please. Okay, same lights off, it's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to play a game. And the game works like this. I'm going to show you these numbers on top of the screen, from 1 to 9. And what you're each going to do is you're going to take turns, you're going to pick one number. Okay? And if somebody else has picked the number, you can't pick it again.
All right.
And here's the purpose of the game. You want to pick 3 numbers, 3 different numbers that are going to add up to the number 15. Okay? And you can't pick the same number as your opponent. Okay? So basically, here's how it would work. Let's say one of you picks 6, the other picks 8, the other one picks 4, the other one picks 3, the other one picks 2, the other one picks 9, and then this one picks 5, and then they have 3 out of the 4 numbers they chose. 3 out of the 4 are now out of the 15. Okay? You guys got it? Yeah. Here's the thing. You're going to do it in your head. I'm going to grab a pen, and I'm going to keep track. So I'm just going to write here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And either one of you, why don't you go first, please?
All right. 9.
9,
4.
4,
2.
2,
8.
No, but you could pick as many as you want,
Oh, okay.
as long as 3 of them add up to 15.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
No,
All right. I need just to tell you what you picked already. You
okay.
know.
I picked 9 and 2.
Correct.
He's gone once.
He's gone twice.
He's gone twice.
Yes, it's your turn now.
So you already picked 4 and you picked 6.
8.
8. Good enough.
3.
6.
No, I'm trying to remember. wait, I know it.
Damn it.
Did I ever pick 1? Nobody picked
You've
1.
not picked 1. Nobody's picked 1.
1.
Very good.
Is that
15. Well done. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. You guys can sit for now. I will call on you later, though.
All right.
So, okay, that was pretty complicated, right? A lot of time, again, you can see that it's a perfect example of a lot of time spent in the think and the sense. You can't really actually see what's going on, so even more time spent in the sense trying to remember what's going on. Sorry, not the sense, the think, trying to remember what's going on. Okay, so that's a really complicated game. What's the simplest game we could ever possibly think of, right? Let's totally change gears. Let's talk about tic-tac-toe, right? That's really complicated. This is way easy, right? So how does it work? You guys know you pick an X. Somebody else puts an O, put an X, put an O, put an X, put an O, put an X, and suddenly somebody wins the game by filling in 3 of the same symbol diagonally, right? Couldn't possibly be simpler. Now you can see how this game, the one game we played before, is really heavy on the think, right? What if I told you that these 2 games are actually not all that dissimilar at all? This is called the magic square. You guys may have heard of this before. If you add up any of the numbers diagonally, vertically, horizontally, it adds up to 15. Which means that basically you could play tic-tac-toe and beat your opponent in this game very, very fast. But when you see those numbers lined up the way they are, it's a lot harder on your brain, right? Think about all this time that you could spend in the act phase by not spending all this time in the think phase. All the time that you could be working. And if we present the information to people in a better way, then they can spend a lot more time acting and a lot less time thinking. A lot less time trying to pick that number and a lot more time acting on it, creating stuff. And a good example of this, let's say, for example, would be the brush palette in Photoshop. Without that preview on the bottom, you'd have to tweak a number, draw a brush stroke. No, that's not quite what I wanted. Go back, change it. By seeing the preview of your brush stroke immediately and playing around with the numbers, not only do you learn what all these different terms mean, like, you know, who knows what dual brush or scattering means, right? Not a lot of people know what all these terms mean. By playing with those numbers and seeing the representation immediately, we're able to transform that numeric information, the data, into a visual representation and understand exactly what we should be doing a lot faster. So that's representation. And now finally, progressive disclosures, the last technique we're going to talk about. So some of you guys may be familiar with this game, which is called Sonic again? Yeah. No? Doom. So Counter-Strike. In the game Counter-Strike, you guys probably know, it's a first-person shooter, and at the beginning of the game, you have money and you're supposed to buy equipment, right? So you pop open this screen to choose the weapons that you want to have, and there are hotkeys for that, and you choose them, and then it goes away, right? You don't want to play Counter-Strike with this screen on top of you, on top of your screen all the time, right? You wouldn't be able to see, you'd likely die very quickly. Now, this is a screenshot I found, obviously a joke, at least I hope so. Somebody made a Wolfenstein. So here in the bottom left, we have some important stuff. We've got the carry meter, which is pretty low. The bladder meter is pretty full, so they got to do something about that. The temperature, it's nice to see 59 degrees Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit's BS anyway. Internet comics, RIP, dead horse meter, which is misspelled as well. There's 2 dead horse meters. So a lot of really, oh, and your awareness is over 9,000. So this is good for you to know. And just in case you forgot you're playing Wolfenstein there, it's right in the middle, just as a reminder. In this little tiny space where you can actually see the game that you're working on, right? All of this extra garbage on the screen that you don't need to see that's on all the time and you can't do anything about it, right? This is ridiculous, right? Kind of funny. Who would ever possibly make a tool? Oh yeah. There are lots of tools that look like this, right? Every single possible setting is on. And the best part is, see this button down here, Pro Mode? I'm not sure I want to know what that is.
Do you have more options?
Yeah.
I mean, like the first one was a sniper window, so like you snipe people.
Well, what about Pro Mode?
Only go deeper. I mean, usually promote removes tools and places are mounted.
So you guys maybe have seen remote controls like this before. So here's one that have these sort of panels that you can slide open to reveal more stuff. Or I've seen a remote control somebody put on Reddit where they taped it up for their parents. And they just had the volume up and down button. But there's nothing wrong with having a very simple interface to start and giving people the option to see more if they really want, right? Which we've probably seen with other things, but unfortunately with a lot of game development tools, we don't see that very often. That's what progressive disclosure is. We show people just enough so that they can do their job, but we also progressively disclose parts of the interface to show them more advanced features that they may not need to have as beginner users. But at least the tool doesn't intimidate them from the start. So icons and color, natural mapping, feedback, excise, representation, and progressive disclosure. These are 6 techniques that I use and that we can use as well, not only to improve tools if you're developing tools, but also to identify problems with tools if you're using tools that are not made by you, made by somebody else, or made by somebody else that you know. Or you can give feedback to somebody who develops the tool and use these terms because these are terms that are understood within the industry of user experience design. You can see how if we add all of these things together, right, we can try to reduce the load that we have on the sense, reduce the load that we have on the think, and try to maximize the amount of time that we spend acting. In other words, creating games, creating content. There are lots and lots and lots of other techniques and terminology that we can talk about. I don't have the time to talk about them today. But there's lots and lots of other stuff that we can use, not just those 6 techniques that I spoke about.
Modes of operation sounds so intense.
It's pretty simple, actually. So let's wrap up with a real-world example. Now we've learned about these 6 different techniques. How can we apply them to a real game development tool and try to improve our productivity? So we're going to talk about a depth of field tool. Those of you who have worked with cameras before, you know that you can set the depth of field to be able to make the background or the foreground a bit blurry and make the object that you're focusing on more sharp. And this is based on an experience that I had working at a game developer a couple of years ago. Now, those of you who have, let's say, worked with cameras or have ever tried to set a camera on an object and tried to blur the background and the foreground, there's lots of different ways to do it. But in some engines, you might have to do something like use some sort of scripting command to do that. So in this case, here we have this DOF command that gives you 5 parameters. You can set 1, which is going to set the distance from the camera to the object you're focusing on. And then these 2 set the start and the end of the blur in the foreground. And these 2 set the start and the end of the blur in the background. So when you understand that, it seems pretty straightforward. You want to have a bit of blur, set the start and the end, front and back, and then a focus point in the middle. This is how a lot of depth of field systems work, essentially. They have these numbers. Now, this is fine if you're setting your depth of field once, right? You might have a depth of field that you want to set once, and that's it. You set it for the rest of the game, and you don't need to change it ever again. And I'm certainly somebody who feels that you don't need to make tools for everything. If something works, then leave it the way it is. Put your energy into another tool instead. Try to do one thing really well. If you're setting your depth of field once, that's okay. But maybe you have to set it again if you're focusing on an object. You talked about a sniper rifle earlier, for example. If you're using a sniper rifle, then the depth of field probably has to change. Or if you have different weapons, a melee weapon versus a long-range weapon might require that you change the depth of field because you might not be able to see what you're looking at. And especially if you have cutscenes, obviously, cutscenes are going to be constantly changing the depth of field as the camera moves around the scene. Pardon me? Yes, yes. But you would have to type in, if you did not have a tool, you'd have to type in each of these commands to be able to change the depth of field depending upon which frame you're at in the cutscene, right? Which would be really frustrating.
How can you tell which one is which?
Yeah, it's not very efficient, is it? There's probably a better way of doing that. So each of these lines would represent a change to the depth of field of the camera. Now somebody might take mercy on you and say, okay, I'm going to make you a tool. I'm going to solve all your problems. We're going to make you a tool. This is going to solve everything, right? And they provide this to you. The depth of field tool. Perfect. This is going to do it, right? It's going to solve our problems. And we can see that this tool really isn't all that different than using that command. Other than the fact that we might forget a semicolon, we might forget a comma somewhere, we might capitalize DOF, but aside from that, we're still facing the same problems. We still have to type in the near start and the near end of the blur, the far end and the far start of the blur, and we still have to set the distance from the camera. It's not all that different from using this command in the first place. We have problems of excise, so we have to go up, change the number, go down, click apply. Go up, change the number, go down, click apply. That's not helping us either. Representation, certainly a big problem. What do these numbers mean? In the same way that we look at the numbers 1 through 9 and don't really understand which one we should pick, how do we know what changing one of those numbers represents? What does it mean to the depth of field when we go ahead and change those numbers? Unless we go through the motions of applying it and testing it and validating what it looks like. So you can see how it seems like somebody is doing you a favor. And I'm sure that they're trying to do their best. They want to try to provide you something that's going to help you. They want to try to provide something that's going to help you manipulate the camera in a better way. But just exposing the data to people is not necessarily going to make them more productive, right? You can see that we're still having the same sorts of problems that we had before. Some things are better, but a lot of things are worse. This is the problem. We typically end up starting off by thinking about the feature. What are we going to provide to people? What's the checklist we can put on the back of the box? What can we provide to somebody? What kind of features can we give them? And then we do some code, and then we slap a UI on top of it, right? We're not necessarily thinking about how people work in that case. And often what happens is we have this problem of people not being efficient with their tools, and we have to go back and rework if we have the time to do that. Often we have to ship the game with what we have. And it doesn't matter, it happens to developers big and small. We have to stop thinking about things in terms of features. We have to think about them a little bit differently. We have to think more about the goals that people are trying to accomplish. What is it that they're trying to achieve with this tool? What is the output? What is the end result that they're looking for? And to help explain this, I'd like to do what I call the Swiss Army knife and scissors test. So I'd like you guys to stand up, please. We're going to do one more exercise, or maybe one or two more too. Here you go. Here you go. Now don't open anything yet. You guys are each going to get a piece of paper. Okay, here you go. There you go. So on 3, you're going to fight to the death. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, hold on a second. Just don't do it yet. So here's the deal, okay? What I need you to do, scissors going to go first. I want you to hold up the piece of paper. In fact, you can face the audience if you'd like. And I'd like you to cut the piece of paper in half, holding it with one hand without folding it.
Oh, without folding it.
So go ahead and use the scissors. No problem. Yeah. Go ahead and cut it right down the middle. No worries. You have to hold it up, though. Hold it up. I'll hold the other side.
All right.
There you go.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. There you go. No, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Not yet. You're good. You're good. That's okay. Here, I'll grab it as a pulse.
Yep,
There we go. Round of applause. Very good. Thank you very much. Oh, that's fine. That's fine. Good enough. All right. Thank you. You can have a seat. Just put the scissors down. All right. You knew what to do right away. Okay. Now, next. So you know those little scissors that you have in Swiss Army knives that you use your thumb?
Are there any?
Okay. Yeah. So if you open them up, so you have to check a few of them though. So to sort of progressively disclose the Swiss Army knife there and try to see if you can find anything in there. Oh yeah. So be careful. Don't cut your finger though, because I don't want the tool to hurt you or cause you to lose any productivity or anything. I know there's a bit of a learning curve on it, but that's I mean, tools are like that. So and I've got stuff to do anyway. So I mean that's the best I can do for you. You find it's in there somewhere. If you want to, you know what? It's got a corkscrew. It's really use a corkscrew. You need a corkscrew right now? Oh, okay. But it doesn't. I spent a lot of time on that corkscrew. Oh wait, you know what? I forgot the scissors. Yeah, they didn't make it into the build last night. But this knife is fine, right? I mean, I've got to do a presentation. So are you good with that? You can cut the piece of paper in half. No problem. Go ahead and give it a shot. Oh wow. I'm sure you can do it. Okay. Go ahead, try to give it a little bit of sawing action, maybe. That's
Sounds great.
okay. Well, can you do overtime later to fix this, though? Or are you? All right. Well, thank you. Let's give him a round of applause, though. I'll make sure to show this to the art director. I'm sure he'll sign off on it.
Is it paid overtime or unpaid overtime?
That matters.
Question.
Yes.
He couldn't have put it on the floor and used it like an X-Acto knife, could he?
No, holding it with one hand.
Floor wasn't a tool.
Oh,
We're
that's
working in the
right.
virtual world, yeah.
Yeah.
Think about that, maybe for next time.
You're not holding, just curve it and then run.
I don't only have one hand.
Curve it with one hand.
On the floor.
Swiss Army knives. Really cool, right? They do a lot of stuff. They've got, bottle openers and little knives and big knives and fingernail cleaners and all sorts of stuff. It looks really cool if you put it in a box. You put a lot of bullet points on the back of the box, right? But does it do what we need to do right now, right? And does it do that thing really well? It does a lot of stuff that we don't need, but it's really cool. A lot of our tools are like this. They do a lot of stuff, and not so well, and especially not as well as you'd like it to. What's interesting about scissors, a lot of things interesting about it. They're all designed more or less the same way. You don't necessarily have to relearn them. Every Swiss Army knife is different. You have to figure out how it works. You can't draw upon your previous experience. And this does one thing really well, right? It cuts paper in half. It just so happens that what we want to do right now is to cut that piece of paper in half. That's the one thing we want to do really well. And that's why we have to understand people's goals. What are they trying to accomplish? And when you are using a tool, if you're giving feedback to somebody about what's not working, you should also be able to communicate to them what's the goal you're trying to accomplish. Because that helps you focus away from things like all of these fancy doodads you can have in a Swiss Army knife, and what you're really trying to accomplish, and building the best tool that can help you accomplish that. Wow.
Isn't he adorable?
Who is he?
My little brother.
He's really into that paper.
We're in Legoland. He's reading the map.
Oh my god. I would be reading that if I was thinking about it. Like, where do they go now?
I haven't memorized.
Wait, that's well, actually.
No.
Oh, okay, I wish.
But I've been there so many times, yeah.
Almost.
Oh.
Wait, there's a Legoland?
Yeah, in San Diego, California. In California.
Oh, I think I know where you're going next.
Maybe tour guide in San Diego, just fly me over. I'll take it.
Pay for your plane ticket? Yeah.
That's tour guide fee.
This is a functional tool.
There's Windows acting.
Windows is being a tool. Is it Windows 10?
Oh,
that's
Windows
why.
10.
That's the first problem.
Okay, well, that's all we got. Like, the thing is, my technician told me that they're not going to troubleshoot Windows 7 and 8 anymore, so like,
Oh,
I
that
know.
sucks.
Yeah.
Do not update it though. It's gonna crash off the freaking PC.
No, it didn't.
Can you do that outlier and say, I like Windows 10?
Yeah, no, Windows just sounds like Windows 7. This is flat UI.
All right,
And Microsoft Watch.
how do we understand goals, right? We understand them by understanding the people who use the tools. How well do we understand the people who use the tools? How well do we know what other people's realities are like? How often do we get up from our desks and understand what other people are going through? Or even the people that provide tools that we don't know, how often do we interact with them to understand what they're going through, what they're trying to produce? So by understanding each other and by understanding our goals, we can try to think about how we're going to present that to people and then think more about programming, and not necessarily the opposite, which is usually how things go, how we end up getting disorganized. So let's go back to this image. This is where we started originally. Speaking of Lego Land. We want to try to produce this image. This is our target image, right? So if what we're trying to do is focus with a camera on the center of the image, we want to try to get this part in focus and try to blur this part a little bit in the front and try to blur this part a little bit in the back. Maybe that's what our tool should look like, right? And it adheres to a lot of these techniques that we just spoke about. Icons and color. Each of these things, even if this was black and white, or even if you were colorblind, would be able to represent. You know what's in the front, you know what's in the back, you know what's in the middle. Based upon the position and based upon the shape of those brackets, which one's the front, which one's the back. Natural mapping. The fact that the camera is on the left, you know which part is towards the front, you know which part is towards the back. It maps well to the way that the camera is set up. Excise, we're manipulating this right here without having to click on this apply button constantly. So a lot less going down to the bottom, up to the top, down to the bottom, up to the top. And representation. This represents to a lot of people a camera and the way that they think about it. Because don't forget that a lot of you guys are artists, you're painters, you might be architects, or have that kind of background. You don't think about things in terms of that depth of field command, right? We don't think about, when we look at a camera and see that it's blurred in the front and the back, we don't think about that as 0.094, right? We think about that visually. So we don't necessarily think about this idea of a distance from the camera. We think about where we're going to focus on. We don't think about necessarily this idea of near and far blur. We think about how much are we going to blur the front and how much are we going to blur the back. And you can see how if, for those of you who are developers in the room, you think, well, this is going to require more work, right? Because we're presenting this data in a totally different way. But the reality is that we can map this pretty much directly to those 5 sliders, right? We can allow people to manipulate them numerically if they are advanced users. If they want to expand something with a progressive exposure control and be able to have more control over it, they can. But the visual representation might be just good enough for most people. And you can map those numbers to each of those different numbers, each of those positions on the slider that we have. Now let's do our last exercise. You can imagine a simulation of using this tool. Let's imagine that we have a team of people who are working on a game, and they're adjusting the camera for the game. Now the art director comes along, and he has some requests about things that he wants to adjust in the camera. Now, as we're doing this, I want you to think about the sense and the think and the act process. You have to first look at the tool, what the tool is telling you. You have to think about what you're going to do, and then you have to make your decision. You have to decide what you're going to do. How are you going to modify the settings? Now here's how this is going to work. So we'll do this one at a time. We'll start with you. If you can stand up again, please.
All right.
So what I'd like you to do, I'm going to show you 3 different camera settings with the original tool that we saw. And I want you to tell me which one has the camera focus point closest to the camera. Okay? Which is the focus point closest to the camera? And I want you to look at the 3 interfaces and tell me as fast as you can which one is the focus point closest to the camera.
So basically, I'm trying to judge this between the camera and the image.
You're going to look at the tool, the numbers in the tool, and try to figure out which one has the focal point closest to the camera.
All right.
You ready? And go. First one, good. So that took a couple seconds, right? Maybe 3 seconds. Good. So the art director's happy. Excellent. You picked the right one. Okay, now let's do that again. Okay, I want you to try to identify which one of these 3 has the focus point closest to the camera.
Can I move back a little bit?
You're sure you're good there.
Cool.
Perfect. You ready?
Yeah.
And go.
That one.
Well, that took 1 second instead of 3 seconds. Let's do that times 200 developers. Thank you, that's great. You can sit down. Perfect. Let's give her a final round of applause. All right, my friend, it's now all up to you. You can stand up, please. If you want to stand there, that's cool too. You can stand there if you'd like. All right, he likes the challenge. So here's the deal. We want to try to figure out which of these three, I'm going to show you the three different camera settings, just like before, so you've got a sense of how this works. So I want you to tell me which one has the most near and far blur, okay? Which one is going to have like a little tiny sliver of the camera that's focused, and the rest is super blurred. Like almost as if you were zooming in on an ant or something, you know what I mean? All right, so I want you to tell me, look at these three different UIs, and tell me which one is the blurriest. But I've got a trick. I'm going to help you out. It's easy. Take near end minus near start, and then add that to far end minus far start. Good? No problem. Ready? And go. You know what? I don't even know which one it is. But you have to try it in the engine, so if you're good waiting 20 minutes for a build, is that okay? Are you cool? Yeah. All right, more overtime, no problem? Okay, let's do one more. Same thing. We've got the near blur and the far blur. Tell me which one has the most amount of blur in the camera. Are you ready? And go. Bottom one. Bottom one. Very good. Thank you very much. Another round of applause. Who is going to do this sort of math every time they have to figure out what has the blurriest at the field? If your build takes a long time or you have to build something to see the difference, not great. You can see how this user interface is sort of reminiscent of that idea of the magic square. By virtue of how we present the numbers, present the information to people, we're able to help them come to a conclusion a lot faster. Just in the way that we present the information to people. And so you can see how that can allow us to reduce the amount of think, reduce the amount of sense, and maximize the amount of that. So now again, at the beginning of the presentation, I spoke about this, how if we have this current situation with our tools where we don't spend a lot of time on our tools so that we can try to get them into the hands of people, but that's not always the best strategy. If we try to spend a bit more time just to understand people's goals, and we apply some of these techniques, we can perhaps make tools that are more productive and require less rework, and maybe we don't have to do overtime like, unfortunately, my friend here has to do with all of those camera work.
Yeah, this was nice.
Here's the thing though, this is just one slider. Right? One slider amongst the sea of buttons and radio buttons and checkboxes that we work with. And that is just one control amongst the sea of other controls in that panel, which is all the different panels in that tool, which is connected to another tool that has all sorts of other connections to those other tools. And we're constantly using all of these controls to manipulate the data and to be able to produce these games. And each of those has a small tax that we pay every time we use them. And if we were to add all of those up together, you might agree that when 200 game developers save 20 minutes per day, they can save over 100 man months per year. So what can you do about this? Well, you can try to think about ways and try to focus on making it important for you to minimize the amount of think, minimize the amount of sense so that you can maximize the app. You can do this by understanding the people who work with you, those who develop the tools, and try to, if you are a tools developer, try to understand the people who use them. Or if you're a user, try to help them understand what your goals are, what your objectives are. Don't just start talking about features. Talk about what you're trying to accomplish. What is it that you're trying to see on the screen? And what's the best way you can work towards that end result? Try to focus on those goals, and maybe before you start coding, think more about how it's going to look first before you go too far, and set yourself down a road that you won't be able to easily or inexpensively turn away from. Read a book. There are all sorts of books on user experience design. Here are just a few. But if you Google user experience design, or if you send me an email, I'll put my email at the end. I'll be happy to recommend a bunch of books to you that I myself read and have applied to the tools that we created Ubisoft. Speaking of which, there was a lot of workshops about this as well. I developed a workshop that I present at Ubisoft. I've done it all around the world at many of our different studios, to try to help our developers and our tools developers and our TDs understand the importance of what I spoke about. And now you can see how if we spend a little bit more time on the tools at the beginning, maybe we can not just save time, but maybe add in that extra polish that we've been hoping so much to be able to put in. But at the end of the day, all that stuff isn't really that important. You know what we really want to happen? We really want this to happen. We want people to have a situation where the tools are so natural to them that they don't even really see them anymore. And they can just really focus on their work and try to make the best work they can ever possibly do. Because the tools aren't there anymore, they can just focus on the content and do the best that they can. And that's why I think the games industry needs to make user experience tools a priority. Thank you very much. Thank you to our participants as well. Give them one final round of applause. Now, I spoke about all these different things, visibility, affordance, etc. I wrote a book. The title is the same as the presentation, Designing the User Experience of Game Development Tools, right here. If you guys want to check it out, it has everything that you saw in the presentation and a lot of stuff from my workshop. Explains a lot of stuff that you might be interested in, including a lot of these terms. And that's it. I'm just going to throw it up there, and I'll leave it there while I take questions. Yes.
Do you guys involve graphic designers in helping to wireframe out your tools and interfaces?
Yeah.
Or is it all programmers?
Sure. And so often, UX and graphic design, these two terms are sort of synonymous, right? People often mix up the two, I find. An important thing to understand about user experience design is that UX is not what we create. It's what the user experiences. It belongs to them. It doesn't belong to us. We don't create. UX design is kind of a catch-all term that's used. Within that design field, there are graphic designers, interaction designers, human factors experts, user researchers, lots of different people. Graphic designers focus on the aesthetics of the tool. But there are also what are called interaction designers that focus on just thinking about how the tool is going to be used. It's not just how it looks, it's how it feels as well. So those two roles work together. Graphic design, a good aesthetic is not enough by itself, but it does contribute a lot to give people confidence in the tool, and it's absolutely something that we use, but not before we focus on understanding people's goals, trying to make sure that, there's nothing worse than a tool that elegantly solves the wrong problem. So that happens often, and I used to think that like UX was about graphic design, and it is, but it's way more than that. UX, UI is just one small part of user experience design. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
So let's say you figure out something with